Today we're talking about the truth about truth, and can everyone have their own truth? This is going to be a very good discussion. I'm going to open it up right away by a beautiful quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, who says, "How much truth can a spirit bear? How much truth can a spirit dare?" So today it's a really popular saying, or a really popular idea, to think that everyone has their own truth. I mean, you maybe have even said this or have someone asked it of you before to, oh, tell me what's your truth. So today we're going to answer that question. Can everyone have their own truth? And if so, does that render the idea of truth meaningless? It's a very important question that we have to ask ourselves today. And it's interesting because I took a poll on this on my Instagram. I asked the question, what do you guys think? Can everyone have their own truth? 80% said yes, whereas 20% said no. So this is going to be an interesting topic indeed. Also, I also want to point out the amazing sort of synchronicity that occurred with the Hyperion Source and the Tortured Orator, both Hyperion channels. The Hyperion Source put out a video on epistemology this week, and the Tortured Orator put out a video on the sort of degradation of truth in society, and it all ties in really well with what we're talking about today. So I love that. If you enjoy today's talk for even more, make sure you check out those two Hyperion channels, the Hyperion Source and the Tortured Order. Their latest videos tie into this perfectly. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as I said, this is an important question, because if you want to know the truth about reality, if you really do, if you want to know what you are, where you are, and why you're here, we have to ask the question, can everyone have their own truth? If so, does that render truth meaningless? So we're going to take a look at the idea. Does everyone have their own truth? Can everyone have their own truth? And we're going to start to dissect this by taking a look at this article by John Searle, who's a philosopher. And it starts off by saying, oh, this is from iai.tv, by the way. Fantastic website. Highly recommend it. Says, I have been a professional teacher of philosophy for 60 years now. One persistent philosophical confusion I have discovered is the temptation among intelligent undergraduates to adopt the conception of relativism about truth, meaning that truth is relative. Truth can be different. It's not easy to get a clear statement of relativism, but the general idea is something like this. There's no such thing as objective truth. All truth statements are made from a perspective, and the perspective is inherently subjective, and the result is that truth is always relative to the interests of the truth staters. So what is true for me is true for me, and what is true for you is true for you. Each of us has a right to our own truth. And I think this sums up quite succinctly what's becoming very popular today in this post-truth era, and very popular in New Age beliefs, mystical circles, where people are like, oh, what's your truth? Tell me your truth. It's this idea that what is true for me is true for me, and what is true for you is true for you. Each of us has our own right to truth, and there is no such thing as objective truth. Now, there might be different interpretations of this, and we'll get into that as well, but it's very important to look at this particular idea here. And this is extremely important, because if the goal is to understand truth, we have to know what truth is and what the bounds of truth are and what the limitations of truth are and what is true. So part of the appeal of this view, right, why people like it, is that it seems both empowering and democratic. It's empowering because I get to decide what is true for me, and democratic because everybody else has the right to decide what is true for them. So it's very appealing. People like this. They love it because, ooh, I'm empowered. I get to choose what is true. No one can tell me I'm wrong. And everyone has the right to decide what is true for them. It's democratic. But as we're going to see, truth is not a democracy. Truth is not something that you can vote on and decide what is or is not true. And as we're going to see, there is absolutely, spoiler alert, there is absolutely truth, objective truth. And we're going to see exactly why that is. But the whole idea here is that if everyone has their own truth, it completely renders the idea of truth to be meaningless. If everyone has their own truth, then there is no such thing as truth, because truth is that which is true regardless. And so something I want to point out here is that what people actually have are not different truths. They have different opinions or beliefs. So a person doesn't have, and we're going to look at the article to see, philosophically exactly why in depth this pertains and holds. But if someone believes a certain thing to be true, that's not their truth. That's their belief. And that might seem kind of trivial, but it's very important to get this right. They believe something to be true. They don't have a truth. They believe something to be true. And you may believe something to be true. But it doesn't mean that they have a truth. Because what this problem brings, this brings a lot of problems. First of all, if everyone actually has a truth, it renders the idea of objective truth meaningless. There is no objective truth, and there is no such thing as true. There is no true. If everyone believes what they believe is true, if everyone's truth is actually true, then there is no truth. Truth does not exist. So it's very important to know that people believe that certain things are true. And here's the thing as well, because again, there's this new age idea, mystical idea about like wanting to be super accepting. And there's nothing wrong with being super accepting, but you can't do it at the expense of truth and living in a fantasy. So for example, something like 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4 is an objective truth. Doesn't matter what you believe in it. Someone can't have their truth that 2 + 2 = 67. That's not their truth. That's something that they believe that is wrong. And they're wrong. They can believe it's true, but they're wrong. 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 doesn't equal 67, no matter how badly that person believes that it's true. 2 + 2 = 67 is not their truth. It's their belief that is wrong. So the problem is here is that, of course, and also this idea of, there's this idea that, everyone's truth is valid. Oh, your truth is valid. This is my truth. This is your truth. It's all valid. Well, here's the problem. Not only are you living in an illusion, in a fantasy, but this leads to very big problems. What about a Nazi's truth? What about a racist's truth? Are their truths valid? Or do they believe something that's wrong? They believe something that's wrong. And you have to look at these extreme cases to see where the smaller cases lead to very negative consequences. So not only does it result in the obliteration of truth and rendering truth meaningless, it also leads to this living in a fantasy and a delusion. It degrades the ability to reason, and it leads to the tolerance of hate, because if everyone's truth is valid, that pertains to Nazis and racists. And of course, that's terrible. No. So we want to be very, very careful and clear. Everyone does not have their own truth. Everyone has their own beliefs. And those beliefs are either right or wrong, true or false. Once again, 2 + 2 is always 4. Doesn't matter how much you believe it's not, it is. You can believe that it's not. That's fine, but you're wrong. So it's great that the world is starting to become more accepting. That's fantastic. But you can't do so at the expense of reality, where you completely deny that there are certain things that are true or false. And the consequence of it is that it actually breeds more intolerance and hatred, as Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance shows. If you tolerate everyone and all their ideas, that means that you have to tolerate like Nazis and racists and homophobes and sexists and genderists and all that. And then you get a very bad world. So it's great that the world is becoming more accepting, but you can't do it such that you are allowing hatred to breed and the obliteration of objective truth. It's very important to know, and that's why it's these words are important. You can't go around saying, well, you shouldn't go around saying that you have your truth and I have my truth, because that renders truth meaningless. You have a belief that something is true, and I have a belief that something is true. one of us is either right or wrong. One of those things are actually true or not. So, but let's continue to see how this goes. And by the way, I want to point out that this, what I'm saying, is not popular. Like I said, I did that poll. 80% of people said that they believed everyone has their own truth, and 20% said they don't. So again, if I were just, I want to make popular videos to get a lot of views, I'd be like, oh yes, everyone has their own truth. What's your truth? This is my truth, and we can just all have our own truths. And you might believe in such and such, and no. See, like the point is to actually know what existence is, so that we can improve our quality of life and build a better world. Not live in fantasies and delusions and believe that all truths are valid, which means that no truths are valid, because there's no such thing as truth in that conception. So John Searle here is laying out what people believe, that what is true for me is true for me, what is true for you is true for you, and each of us has our own right to truth. And he says that this is appealing to people because it's empowering. I get to choose my truth. And it's democratic because everyone has a right to choose what is true for them. So it's very, very appealing. People like it. So John continues to say, I think this view cannot be stated coherently, and what I want to do is to expose its incoherence. So he's essentially saying this is incoherent. It makes no sense. So let us start with objectivity and subjectivity. These notions are ambiguous between an epistemic sense and an ontological sense, where epistemic means having to do with knowledge and ontological means having to do with existence. So we're going to look and unravel this idea here with regard to objectivity and subjectivity, and epistemology and ontology. So epistemology has to do with, it's a branch of philosophy dealing with the study of science, the study of knowledge. And then ontology is the study of being, which in a nutshell means the study of what is real. So we're going to look at this through the lens of knowledge and reality, essentially, by looking at epistemology and ontology. So if I say that Rembrandt was born in 1606, this statement is epistemically objective because its truth can be settled as a matter of fact. If I say Rembrandt was the greatest painter that ever lived, well, that's a matter of subjective opinion. It's epistemically subjective. Underlying this distinction is a distinction in modes of existence. So first of all, you're right. Rembrandt lived in 1606. This is epistemically objective, whereas he's the greatest painter of all time. That's subjective. The very big difference and important as we go forward. So mountains. So underlying this is distinction in modes of existence. So that was dealing with epistemology. Now look at modes of existence, dealing with ontology. Mountains and molecules have an existence that does not depend on being experienced by a human or animal subject. They are ontologically objective. Pains, tickles, and by the way, I want to talk about, if anyone out there is thinking about the quantum mechanical measurement problem and all that. That has to do with the Copenhagen interpretation, and Hyperianism absolutely rejects this. Look at my other videos for why that is. There is objective reality that does not require a human conscious subject to experience it for it to exist. So mountains and molecules, right? Mountains, molecules, things, they have an existence that does not depend on a human experiencing them. Pains, tickles, and itches exist only so far as they are experienced by a subject, right? So you require that subjective experience to feel the pain of a cut. They are ontologically subjective. Given this distinction, we can now state the thesis of the relativity of truth with a little more precision. Granted that there is a reality that exists independent of human beings, and of course there is a reality that exists of human beings. It wasn't like as soon as humans evolved, everything just popped into existence. There is a reality. So given that there is a reality that exists independently of human beings, all statements about reality are made from a subjective point of view, and hence all statements are epistemically subjective. The ontological subjectivity of statement making is sufficient to guarantee the truth of relativism. All statements are epistemically subjective because all claims are made relative to the point of view of the statement maker. So there is no such thing as objective truth. So he's putting more precisely the position of relativism. Okay? So, and in a nutshell, I mean, again, it's said precisely, but in a nutshell, this is that there is no such thing as objective truth because everything is made from a subjective point of view. That's the claim of relativism in a nutshell. So it should be apparent already that there's something fishy about relativism because it is confusing ontological subjectivity, that which is, with epistemic subjectivity, having to do with knowledge. All statements are indeed made by conscious subjects from their ontologically subjective point of view. Right? All statements do come from subjectivities. But it does not follow that the statement made is about something ontologically subjective, nor does it follow that the statement made is thereby epistemically subjective. In a word, perspectivalism does not imply relativism. So just because a person has a certain perspective does not mean that relativism is true. That is, that truth is relative. Just because people have different perspectives does not mean that truth is relative. Very important. Every statement is indeed made from a perspective, but relativism doesn't follow. So there is a traditional and I think correct refutation of relativism that goes as follows. And this is great. How about the statement of relativism itself? Is it objectively true? Or is it just a matter of subjective opinion? Right? So, right, the statement that relativism is true, that there is the statement that everyone can have their own truth, right? Well, in terms of relativism, the truth itself, what you just said, is subjective. It's not objectively true because you have obliterated objective truth. So you can't say that it is true if you're saying that all truth is relative. Does that make sense? If all truth is relative, you can't coherently say that relativism is true because there is no such thing as objective truth. Well, maybe relativism is true for you, but it's not my truth. So how about the statement of relativism itself? Is it objectively true, or is it just a matter of subjective opinion? If it is objectively true, then it's self-contradictory because it's refuted by itself as an example of objective truth. If relativism is an objective truth, then why shouldn't there be a whole lot of other objective truths, right? So if it is true that relativism is true, then that means that relativism is an objective truth and that there ipso facto can be objective truth. But it's self-refuting, you see, because if relativism is the idea that there is no objective truth and that all truths are relative, but relativism itself is ultimately a truth statement. So, but if relativism is only a subjective opinion, then we have no more reason to accept it than its negation. So if someone goes, oh, well, no, then it's not. It's just my subjective opinion. Well, then we don't have to take it seriously and we can just reject it because even by their own standards, like it doesn't have any value. It's valueless because it's just your opinion or slash your truth, which if it's not ubiquitous, then it has no meaning. So, defenders of relativism feel that there is some sort of logical trick involved in this objection, that it really doesn't get the point behind the radical perspectivism that motivates relativism or perspectivalism. If all claims are only made from a perspective, and perspectives are inherently subjective, then relativism could still be true, even though there are these logic chopping objections that can be made to it. So if you can read this article for yourself, there's now what follows is a principle of logic and language. It's too hard for me to. I could read it, but it would sound very dry, and you're better off just reading it yourself. But let's skip over this part here and continue. So let's take the statement "snow is white." Right? Snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. Right? So the statement "snow is white" is only a true statement if and only if snow is white. But if the truth of snow is white becomes relative, then the fact that snow is white becomes relative. So if truth only exists to my point of view, then reality itself exists only relative to my point of view. Relativism is not coherently stated as a doctrine about truth. It must have consequences about reality itself because of the principle of disquotation. If truth is relative, then everything is relative. All right, so essentially that if you're saying that truth is relative, then statements about reality, truth statements such as snow is white, is relative, which means the facts themselves would be relative, which means that everything is relative, which means, as we'll see here, enters into the realm of solipsism. So, well, perhaps relativists should welcome this result. Maybe all of reality ought to be thought of as relative to individual subjects. Maybe everything is relative. Absolutely everything. Why should there be an objective reality beyond individual subjects? The problem with this is that this is now a form of solipsism. Solipsism is the doctrine that the only reality is my reality. So basically what solipsism means, if you follow this to its logical conclusion, that means that, like, you watching this right now, that's the only reality that there is, and that there is no one else that is actually like a sentient subject in your reality. Essentially, you are the only one that actually truly exists. That's what follows from a total relativism. The reason that solipsism follows immediately from relativism about reality is that the only reality I have access to is my reality. Perhaps you exist and have a reality, but if so, I could never say anything about it or know anything about it, because all the reality I have access to is my conscious subjectivity. So what relativism, if you follow it through to its logical conclusions, what this ends up happening is that we are all segregated into our own individual realities, in which we're all don't have access to each other's reality. Because all of our realities operate differently according to our truths, and hence are incompatible with each other. And so we are all sort of compartmentalized into our own realities, but can't access each other's. That means, like, right now, I'm in my reality right now, but I'm not in yours. You are in your own reality and don't have access to mine. Yes, that's crazy. That's crazy. It's crazy. If it sounds crazy, it's because it's crazy. It's obviously not true. But this is what happens when you follow through with relativism. So the difficulty with relativism is that there's no intermediate position of relativism between absolutism about truth and total solipsism. Relativism about reality follows, and relativism about reality, if accepted, is simply solipsism. There's no coherent position of relativism about objective truth short of total solipsism. Well, what does all this matter? So I hope we're going to read why it all matters, but I hope that the ridiculousness of this position, like this position is obviously ridiculous. Like, you can have all these logical proofs and arguments for why it's ridiculous, but it should be pretty obvious why it's ridiculous. If there is no such thing as objective truth, and what is true for you is really true for you, and what is true for me is really true for me, then it renders truth meaningless, and ultimately our realities would be incompatible with each other, because facts would reflect differently on our realities, so we would have to actually literally exist in different realities. So it's completely you know, another way to look at it would be sort of like if, let's say we each were playing a different video game. You were playing Tetris and I was playing Call of Duty. That's like different realities because we both have different truths, right? Like pretend each game represents a reality based on certain truths. Those games are not compatible with each other. We can't connect to an online server and play multiplayer together because those games aren't compatible. They're completely different games. You see, that's what happens when you have different, when you say that truth is relative and these truths reflect facts about reality. These realities become incompatible, just like two games that are wildly different become incompatible. Now, what is true is that there is an objective truth. That means we're all playing the same game and we can all connect to the same multiplayer server and interact together because there's no compatibility issues. They all work together logically and consistently. And that's incredibly important in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, because in Hyperianism, truth is objective, truth is absolute, and is exemplified by mathematics. 2 + 2 = 4 for everyone, for all time. And you don't have, you know, if you believe that 2 + 2 = 67, that's not your truth. That's your belief, and it's wrong. So what does all this matter? It matters because there is an essential constraint on human rationality. When we are communicating with each other, at least some of the time, we're aiming for epistemic objectivity. There is no way we can state that 2 + 2 = 4 or that snow is white without being committed to objective truth. The fact that such statements are made from a point of view, the fact that there's always a perspective, is in no way inconsistent with the fact that there is a reality being described from that point of view. And that indeed, from that subjective point of view, we can make epistemically objective statements. So just because the statement 2 + 2 = 4 is coming from a subjective perspective, that is mine, does not mean that it is not objectively true, because it is a subjective statement about an objective truth. So once again, there are two different ways of looking at this. All right, I think there are two different ways of looking at this. There are those who actually literally believe that truth is relative, and that what is true for me is actually literally true for me, and what is true for you is actually literally true for you. I think that should be self-evident. It should be obvious why that's an insane position. I mean, if you don't understand why, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but it should be obvious why that can't be the case. Okay. So there's another way of looking at it, though, where people use it more kind of metaphorically, like, oh, well, what you believe is your truth, right? It's like kind of like a shorthand way of saying, oh, that's your belief. You believe that God exists. That's your truth. It's not true for me, but that's your truth. And so I think in that second way of looking at it, where people aren't actually literally believing that, well, in your reality, a God does exist, but in my reality, a God does not exist, where they're more looking at it as a belief, that is less dangerous than the first, but is still a problem. We don't want to get into a habit of rendering truth meaningless. We don't want to say that is your truth. We want to say that is your belief, because as long as we keep saying that is your truth, it destroys the idea of what truth is. It also comes with it this connotation and implication that all truths are valid, which comes with the idea of, well, if you have to accept everyone's truth, that means accepting very hateful and very, racist and bigoted truths. So just like if someone believes 2 + 2 = 67, that's their belief that's wrong. And just like someone who believes, some very racist thing, that's not their truth. That's their belief that is wrong. So, again, I feel this is not a popular video, because people, again, like the poll that I took, people love this idea that everyone has their own truth. But no matter which way you look at it, it is extremely negative. The first way is just absolutely insane and clearly false. And the second way leads to a degradation of objective truth and renders it, starts to degrade its meaning rapidly, and leads to the inclusion, if we believe all truths are valid, leads to the inclusion of very, very hateful positions that will lead to the destruction of our world. Ultimately, yes. So it might seem small to say, instead of, well, that's your truth or that's my truth, that's your belief or my belief, seems small, but it's very important, because language is how we communicate, and it shapes our view of reality, and it shades our view of reality. And we have to be very precise in our meanings so that we don't run into very dangerous implications down the road. So, again, it's not trivial. It's important. And so I hope that you will really take away from this why things like this are important, and why, this is just one of many of rapidly growing New Age beliefs that are degrading to progress and understanding and ultimately quality of life. And this isn't about being accepting or not accepting or tolerant or intolerant. People can believe what they want to believe. That's fine. But it's not their truth. It's their belief. So, anyway, I hope that this sheds some light on the issue. Once again, I think that this is probably a lot different than what people were expecting. They probably expected me to be like, oh, yes, everyone has their own truth. But no, that is not the case. And we must make sure and remember at all times, this is why it's so important in Hyperianism, our goal is to know truth, to know objective truth. Doesn't matter how we feel about it. Doesn't matter, what we believe about it. We want to know what is true. We don't want to be wrapped up in lies. We don't want to be wrapped up in delusion. To think everyone has their own truth destroys the concept of truth and falsehood completely. Doesn't matter. Truth and lies, they lose their meaninglessness. They lose their meaning. And in Hyperianism, we are devoted to truth. And that will lead to the creation of a better world. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone that supports on Patreon, especially Trent, Cassidy, Renaissance Fairy, Michael, Evie, Alan, Angela, Maria, Brian, John, Chubby Bunny, and our newest supporters, High Expectations Counseling. And I just put Chubby Bunny up there as well. So thank you both. If you guys want to support my work, if you ever feel like you've learned something or gotten something from my videos, consider supporting on Patreon. The link's right over here. You get access to our weekly secret live streams. We're having one right after this. And our hidden Discord server, The Citadel. And it helps out tremendously, with all this, censorship and bullshit in the world. And especially because, I'm not here selling out and just telling people what they want to hear. It's about truth with a capital T. It helps out a lot. All your support is how I can continue to create and get this information out there. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.